If you think September means the garden is winding down, think again. For many gardeners, September can be one of the most exciting planting months of the entire year. The summer heat may finally be easing, the soil is still holding warmth, and conditions are becoming much more comfortable for a whole new wave of vegetables. While some summer crops are slowing down, you can be getting the next harvest started. And today, we're looking at 10 awesome crops you can plant in September to keep your garden productive, colorful, and full of fresh food. Welcome back to Fresh Homegrown Harvest, where we're all about growing more food, making the most of every season, and turning even a small garden into a productive growing space. If you've ever looked at your garden in September and thought, I guess that's it until spring, this video could completely change the way you think about fall gardening. Because September isn't necessarily the end. In many climates, it's a fresh beginning. Before we get into the 10 crops, there's one important thing to understand. September planting depends heavily on where you live. A gardener in a warm climate may be able to grow certain crops well into winter, while someone in a colder region may have only a short window before frost. So, use these crops as a guide, and always consider your local temperatures, first frost date, daylight hours, and the amount of time each crop needs to mature. 1. Radishes. The first crop I want you to consider is radishes. If you want a vegetable that can give you a relatively quick reward, radishes are hard to ignore. They're compact, fast-growing, and perfectly suited for the cooler conditions that often arrive as summer fades. Instead of taking up a huge section of your garden, you can tuck radishes between slower-growing crops, along garden edges, or into containers. One of the biggest advantages of planting radishes in September is cooler weather can help produce crisp, flavorful roots. During extreme heat, radishes can sometimes become overly spicy, stressed, or bolt quickly. As temperatures moderate, conditions can become much more favorable. Sow the seeds directly into loose soil, keep the seedbed consistently moist during germination, and thin seedlings if they become overcrowded. And don't forget the leaves. Radish greens can also be useful in the kitchen when harvested young and handled appropriately. That means one small planting can provide more than just the familiar red or white roots. Succession planting is another great strategy. Rather than planting all of your radishes at once, sow a small amount every week or two while conditions remain suitable. That can give you a more continuous harvest instead of everything ready at the same time. 2. Spinach. Crop number 2 is spinach, and September can be a fantastic time to get it started in many regions. Spinach prefers cooler conditions and can struggle when temperatures become excessively hot. As autumn approaches, the environment can become much more suitable for producing tender leaves. When planting spinach, focus on good soil preparation. Spinach performs best in fertile soil with good drainage and adequate moisture. You don't need to bury the seeds deeply. Plant according to the instructions for your variety, keep the soil from drying out during germination, and give the plants enough room to develop. Here's another reason spinach belongs on your September planting list. You don't necessarily have to wait for giant plants before harvesting. Young leaves can be harvested gradually, allowing the plant to continue producing more foliage when conditions are favorable. This makes spinach especially useful for gardeners who want a steady supply of fresh greens rather than one enormous harvest. 3. Kale. The third crop is kale. If you want something that can provide a long harvest window, kale deserves serious consideration. Kale is known for its ability to tolerate cooler conditions, and many varieties can continue producing when other vegetables have already slowed down. September planting gives kale time to establish before temperatures become much colder in many regions. Start with healthy soil and provide enough sunlight for strong growth. As the plants mature, harvest outer leaves rather than stripping the entire plant at once. This allows the central growing point to keep producing new leaves. And there's something satisfying about having kale growing when the summer garden is beginning to look tired. Instead of watching empty spaces appear, you can have fresh green leaves developing for future meals. You can also grow kale in containers if garden space is limited, provided the container is large enough and has good drainage. 4. Carrots. Our fourth September crop is carrots. Carrots are another excellent cool season vegetable, but they require a little more patience than radishes. The key to successful carrots is starting them in soil that is loose, relatively stone-free, and easy for the roots to penetrate. If your soil is hard, compacted, or filled with large stones, carrots may struggle to form attractive roots. Before planting, loosen the soil and remove obstacles from the growing area. Sow seeds directly because carrots generally don't appreciate unnecessary root disturbance during transplanting. Carrot seeds can be small, so avoid planting them too deeply. Keep the surface consistently moist while they germinate. This is especially important because carrot seeds can take longer to emerge than some other vegetables. Once seedlings are established, thin them carefully so each plant has enough space to develop. The reward is worth the wait. Depending on your variety and climate, you may be able to harvest carrots later in the season or continue growing them as temperatures cool. And unlike some vegetables that demand constant attention, carrots can be surprisingly low maintenance once established. 5. Beets. Crop number 5 is beets. Beets are an excellent addition to a September garden because they provide both roots and edible greens. That means you're getting 2 potential harvests from one crop. Beets prefer cool conditions and can develop beautifully when temperatures are moderate. Sow them directly into prepared soil, keep moisture consistent during establishment, and thin crowded seedlings. Remember that beet seeds are often actually clusters of seeds, so one seed ball can produce multiple seedlings. Thinning is therefore important if you want the roots to develop properly. The greens can be harvested while the roots are developing, but avoid removing too many leaves from a young plant at once. Let the plant maintain enough foliage to support continued growth. Later, when the roots reach a desirable size, you can harvest them according to your preference. 6. Green onions. The 6th crop on our list is green onions. These are incredibly useful for gardeners because they don't require a huge amount of space. You can grow them in garden beds, containers, raised beds, or even along the edges of other planting areas. Green onions can add fresh flavor to salads, soups, stir-fries, sandwiches, and countless other meals. Because they're compact, they're particularly valuable when you're trying to make every square foot of your garden productive. When planting, choose a variety suited to your climate and provide fertile, well-drained soil. Keep the plants watered consistently while they establish, but don't leave them sitting in waterlogged conditions. Depending on the type you grow, you may harvest young onions or allow them to mature further. And here's a simple September gardening trick. Don't feel like you have to plant an enormous row. Start small. A short row planted at regular intervals can provide a surprisingly useful supply of fresh onions over time. 7. Lettuce. Crop number 7 is lettuce. If you've ever struggled with lettuce during the hottest part of the year, September may provide a welcome opportunity to try again. Lettuce generally prefers cooler temperatures, and excessive heat can cause plants to become stressed or bolt. There are many different types of lettuce, from loose-leaf varieties to heading types, so choose one that fits your growing conditions and the amount of time you have before colder weather arrives. For a continuous supply, consider succession planting. Instead of sowing one large batch, plant smaller amounts periodically. That way, as one group approaches harvest, another is still developing behind it. Lettuce makes an excellent container crop. A shallow but adequately sized container can produce a useful amount of leaves. Just make sure the container drains properly and doesn't dry out excessively. 8. Peas. The 8th crop is peas, and this is one you'll want to consider carefully based on your climate. Peas generally prefer cool growing conditions, making them a classic cool season crop. In regions where September provides enough time before severe cold arrives, peas can be a rewarding addition to the garden. There are different types of peas, including shelling peas, snap peas, and snow peas. Each has its own harvesting style and growing characteristics. Some varieties are compact, while others benefit from support. If you're growing climbing peas, give them a trellis or another appropriate support early rather than waiting until the plants are already tangled. Young pea plants can climb surprisingly quickly once conditions become favorable. Keep the soil reasonably moist during establishment, but avoid constantly waterlogged conditions. And because peas are legumes, they have an interesting relationship with soil microorganisms that can help them obtain nitrogen. That doesn't mean they never need good soil management, but it does make them a fascinating crop for a productive garden. 9. Bok Choy. Crop number 9 is Bok Choy, also known as Pak Choy. This leafy vegetable is especially interesting for gardeners who want something different from the usual lettuce and spinach. Bok Choy can grow relatively quickly under favorable conditions, and many varieties prefer cooler weather. That makes September an excellent month to consider it in areas where temperatures are becoming milder. Bok choy can be grown in beds or containers, and its crisp stems and leaves make it incredibly versatile in the kitchen. You can use it in soups, stir-fries, noodle dishes, or simple vegetable meals. One thing to watch is moisture. Like many leafy vegetables, bok choy grows best when it has consistent access to water. Irregular watering can stress plants and affect growth. Also keep an eye out for common garden pests that enjoy young leafy greens. 10. Garlic. And that brings us to crop number 10, garlic. Garlic is different from the quick-growing crops we've already discussed because you're planting now for a much later reward. In many regions, garlic is planted in fall, so it can establish roots before winter and continue developing through the following growing season. If you're planting garlic in September, select healthy planting materials suited to your region. Separate the cloves and plant them with the appropriate orientation and depth for your local conditions. The pointed end generally faces upward. Choose a location with good drainage and plenty of sunlight. Garlic does not appreciate sitting in soggy soil, so drainage is especially important. After planting, a layer of suitable mulch can help moderate soil conditions and protect the soil surface from temperature swings, depending on your climate. The beautiful thing about garlic is that it teaches us an important gardening lesson. Not every planting is about getting food immediately. Some crops are investments in the future. You plant today because you want to harvest months from now. Prepare your September garden. Now, if you're thinking, that sounds like a lot of crops, don't worry, you don't need to plant all 10. In fact, trying to grow everything at once can make gardening unnecessarily complicated. Instead, choose 3 or 4 crops that fit your climate, available space, and eating habits. For example, if you want fast results, radishes and leafy greens could be a good combination. If you want crops that can provide a longer harvest window, kale and green onions may be attractive choices. If you're thinking ahead to next season, garlic could be one of the most satisfying September plantings you make. Improve the soil. Now, the next thing to consider is soil preparation. September planting doesn't mean simply scattering seeds on top of whatever soil happens to be available. Your new crops are going to need a good environment to establish their roots. Remove spent summer plants that are no longer productive, but don't automatically remove everything that is still healthy. Some summer crops may continue producing. Instead, gradually make space as plants finish their productive period. Add mature compost or other suitable organic matter if your soil needs improvement. The goal is not to create a perfect garden overnight. The goal is to create soil that holds moisture reasonably well, drains excess water, and provides a supportive environment for roots. Check sunlight. Another important factor is sunlight. As the seasons change, the angle of the sun changes too. A location that received plenty of direct sunlight earlier in summer may receive less as autumn progresses, especially if nearby trees or structures cast longer shadows. Before planting, take a look around your garden. Observe where sunlight falls during the day. Place crops that need more light in brighter locations, while some leafy greens may tolerate slightly less direct sun depending on the variety and local conditions. Water carefully. And don't forget about watering. One of the biggest mistakes gardeners make during seasonal transitions is following the same watering routine they use during summer. September weather can be unpredictable. You might have hot, dry days followed by heavy rain. Instead of watering automatically according to the calendar, check the soil and pay attention to actual weather conditions. Newly planted seeds need consistent moisture while they germinate, but that doesn't mean flooding the soil. Once plants established, water them according to their needs, soil type, weather, and local conditions. Use mulch. Mulching can also be extremely useful. A suitable layer of organic mulch can help reduce moisture loss, moderate soil temperatures, and protect the soil surface. Just avoid piling mulch directly against plant stems, and make sure the material you use is appropriate and reasonably clean. Try succession planting. Now let's talk about succession planting, because this simple technique can completely change the productivity of a small garden. Imagine you plant all your radishes on September 1st. A few weeks later, they may all become ready around the same period. Instead, you could plant a smaller batch, then another batch later, as long as your local growing conditions allow. The same concept can work with lettuce, spinach, green onions, and other suitable crops. You're essentially creating a pipeline of crops rather than one single harvest. This is one of the best ways to make a small garden feel much larger. You don't necessarily need more land, you need better timing. Interplanting wisely. Another smart strategy is interplanting. Some fast-growing crops can occupy spaces between slower-growing plants. For example, quick radishes can sometimes be grown between crops that will eventually take up more space, provided their needs and spacing requirements are compatible. But remember, complementing planting should not become an excuse for overcrowding. Every plant still needs enough light, water, nutrients, and airflow. More plants in a space doesn't automatically mean more food.
Watch for pests. You should also keep an eye on pests and diseases. Cooler weather doesn't mean your garden suddenly becomes pest-free. In fact, some pests can become particularly noticeable on tender leafy greens. Inspect plants regularly. Look underneath leaves, check new growth, and notice changes early. If you see damage, identify the likely cause before reaching for a treatment. Not every hole in a leaf means the same thing, and not every problem requires the same response. Healthy plants are generally better able to cope with minor pest pressure, which is another reason soil preparation, proper spacing, adequate sunlight, and consistent moisture matter so much. Clean up strategically. There's also something else you can do in September that many gardeners overlook. Clean up strategically. Remove diseased plant material and heavily damaged plants when appropriate. Clear away debris that could harbor pests or disease. But don't treat every fallen leaf or piece of organic matter as garden garbage. Healthy plant material can sometimes contribute to composting systems when handled appropriately. The goal is not to create a sterile garden. The goal is to maintain a healthy growing environment. Make use of containers. And if you're growing in containers, September can be a perfect opportunity to rethink how you use them. Containers allow you to move your garden into more favorable locations and make use of patios, balconies, porches, and other small spaces. Lettuce, radishes, green onions, spinach, and some varieties of kale can work especially well in containers when the container's size, drainage, soil, and watering are appropriate. Just remember that containers can dry out faster than garden soil. They can also become waterlogged if drainage is poor, so check them regularly rather than assuming rainfall or a fixed watering schedule will always be enough. Don't give up on the garden. Now, here's the bigger lesson behind all 10 crops. Don't let the calendar tell you that your garden is finished. Gardening is not a single season. It is a continuous cycle of planting, growing, harvesting, clearing, preparing, and planting again. When one crop finishes, another can take its place. September can be that bridge between the abundance of summer and the cooler months ahead. Instead of looking at the empty spaces in your garden as signs of the season ending, look at them as opportunities. Maybe that empty spot can become a row of spinach. Maybe that container can hold lettuce. Maybe the space where your beans finished can become a new planting area for radishes. Maybe a corner of the garden can become your garlic bed for next year's harvest. And remember, gardening success isn't about planting the most crops, it's about planting the right crops at the right time for your particular conditions. So, before you head outside, take a few minutes to make a simple September garden plan. Look at the space you have. Check your local weather pattern. Think about your expected first frost if you live in a cold region. Decide which crops you actually enjoy eating. Then, start small. Plant a row of radishes, sow some spinach, try a few kale plants. Put carrots in loose soil. Add beets. Plant green onions. Give lettuce another chance. Try peas if your climate allows. Grow some bok choy. And if the timing is right for your region, get garlic into the ground for a future harvest. You don't need a giant backyard. You don't need expensive equipment. You don't need a perfect garden. You need a little planning, healthy soil, suitable crops, and the willingness to keep growing when everyone else thinks the gardening season is over. And that is what makes September so exciting. Because while one chapter of the garden may be closing, another one is just beginning. So, if your garden has started looking a little tired, don't give up on it yet. Walk through your growing space and look again. Look at the empty patches. Look at the containers. Look at the beds where summer crops are finishing. Those spaces may be waiting for your next harvest. And if you remember only one thing from today's video, let it be this. September is not necessarily the end of the gardening season. It can be the beginning of your next harvest. Choose crops suited to your climate. Prepare the soil. Plant at the right time. Keep moisture consistent while seeds establish. Protect young plants when necessary. Harvest gradually, and keep succession planting in mind. The garden doesn't have to stop producing simply because summer is ending. So which of these 10 crops are you planning to plant this September? Radishes, spinach, kale, carrots, beets, green onions, lettuce, peas, bok choy, or garlic? Let us know in the comments, because your answer could give another gardener an idea for their own garden. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to Fresh Homegrown Harvest for more practical gardening ideas, seasonal planting tips, harvest strategies, and simple ways to grow more fresh food at home. Thanks for spending some time in the garden with us today. Keep planting, keep learning, keep experimenting, and most importantly, keep growing. Because there is always something you can grow, and sometimes the best harvest begins exactly when you think the season is ending.